Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leathercraft, and we are going to learn to hand sew. You're going to be amazed at how easy this is and how beautiful the outcome is, because that's all we're looking for, ease and outcome. Now, this video, a little bit more geared towards those of us who are new to the craft, or those of us who work some leather but haven't stepped into hand sewing. Here's the best part. It's quick, it's easy, and it's affordable. All right, right off the bat, we've got a hand sewing kit. We're going to work straight from that. No fluff. Exactly what you need to start hand sewing. Secondly, we're going to use a saddler stitch. It's almost the only stitch I use. It's beautiful, in my opinion, stronger than a machine stitch. But here's the coolest part. A project like this, not out of our reach. We can sew this. If we have nothing but a kitchen table or a coffee table as a workspace, we can make a briefcase. One more point there. Look at that gorgeous suede. That's one of our beautiful suedes. Now, let's do this. Saddler stitch. Let's jump over to a pick. Get an idea of what we're looking at. Right off the bat, look at that. Patent leather purse. Every bit of that is hand sewn. That's nothing but a weekend project at best. What would that sell for at a top-end store? Journal cover, holster. We've got videos on both of those, and the knife sheath. It's a gorgeous, clean, tight stitch. Again, looks just like a machine. All right, let's do this. Tedious. Yes, sewing can be tedious, but not really. Let's jump over to a quick clip from one of our other videos. Let's see how fast we can hand sew. All right, I'm going to wait for my watch to get around to 10 seconds till, and let's start. All right, so with that, look at that, 2.5 inches in 1 minute. Not as fast as a machine by any means, but 2.5 inches in a minute, that's not bad. And look at the ease and the outcome there. Clean, tight stitch. All right, anything I use in this video, weaverleathercraft.com, or look below, we've got links there. Going to take you straight to the website. So our first step, we're going to add a groove line. Easy to do, easy tool to pick up. So let's step over to our pattern table, drop in a groove line. Now, the primary job of a groover is simply to sink literally a trench along the edge of our leather. It's going to do two things for us. First off, it's going to give us a great guide for our chisel. But secondly, that's going to allow our stitch line to sink down into the leather. Therefore, that's going to reduce the risk of it snagging or catching on anything. So a groove is simply this. I'm going to take my guide arm. These are adjustable. In fact, let's take a quick peek there. This is adjustable. So I can move my grooved line in or out from my edge. Now, you'll notice here I've got this taped, marked with yellow, because this is set at 1/8 of an inch. Therefore, I only use this on my sewing. Therefore, if I'm going to marry two pieces together, I chisel separately, we're going to have a nice meet on the edge, okay? So with this, here's our guide arm and our cutting head. Simply going to butt the cutting arm right against the edge of the leather. I'm going to bring my hand up about 45 degrees, and I'm going to give it a little counterclockwise pressure. There we go, easy enough. All right, so that makes a nice, clean, parallel line to our edge. Now, we can make multiple passes on this. But the problem here is we need to be careful, because that's going to create a tab that's going to tear off, thus the project, no durability. Now, with this, I said the primary job for a groover is our edge, but I love it on every project. Notice here I've got a groove line on every edge here. I think this is a dagger frog. But doesn't that fill that out? Really gives that edge a finished look. So that's one of the few tools that I use for my edge work. All right, so let's jump over. We're going to do this two ways. Now, with this, we're simply going to marry two pieces together. We're going to groove separate, chisel separate, and sew together. Secondly, though, we've got a piece here. Now, this is a little different because sometimes we have to go a different route here. This is going to make life very easy. What I've done is I've glued my backing onto my face leather. We'll just consider this the face, because it's going to be very difficult if I've got a round corner to cut two pieces flopped that's going to match. So therefore, laying that in, trying to glue that in, get those to meet, is a big headache. But what we can do is simply glue on our backing and trim to our body. And here's a perfect example. Notice here I've got a face leather, then I've got a suede, then on the back I've got a backing. So therefore, that's going to be tough to line all that up. No, let's make it easy on ourselves. Let's just drop our backing in, overcut, and then I'm simply going to use the face as my straight edge. And you'll be amazed at how clean our edge is going to be. There we go. All right, look at that. Clean and tight. In fact, that looks like it was die cut. Okay, so great trick there. All right, let's jump over here. We're going to drop in a groove line. We're simply going to sew two sides. So with my groover, 1/8 inch, I'm going to run an edge. There we go, maybe 2 passes. There we are, okay, easy enough. Now, on this, we're going to deal with a square corner. Over here, we're going to deal with a round corner. So let's groove this other side. There we go. Okay, now, you notice I'm running right off the edge. Typically, I'll bevel this, slick it, so therefore that's not going to be a matter. But you can start right from our corner. All right, let's jump over here. Now, a little bit different here, because with this, we're going to sew from one side. I don't want to drop my groove line in on the back because in a perfect world, my chisel can go straight through. I don't live in that world. So what's going to happen is on my back side, my chisel will probably be a little bit in or out from my groove. It's going to look terrible. But if we only have a stitch line here, it's going to look fine, just like it was sewn, okay? So we've got our 2 pieces grooved. Now let's jump over to our quartz where we're going to drop in our chisel line. Now we're going to use a 1/8 inch tine. 1/8 inch flats, my favorite, it's what comes in the kit because this is what we've looked at thus far. But let's don't write off a diamond hole. These are gorgeous, makes a nice stitch line, but also too, on a quality point. Notice as my spread gets smaller, so does my tine. That's a weaver tool. It's a sign of a quality tool. All right, let's start with our round corner. Now with this, we're going to start with a 6 tine chisel, 1/8 inch spread. Basically, that's 5 stitches per inch. Now, 4 stitches really gets big. 6 kind of starts to group on me. To me, this is the best look. So let's start right here. We're going to drop in our tines right in our groove line. There we go. In fact, I can actually feel that sit down in that line. I'm going to do my best to get that straight up and down. There we go. Look at that, clean and straight, consistent from the edge. Now, when we take this out, usually putting tines through or chisel through is not a problem. It's getting it out is the problem. I don't want to go left and right. This is a quality tool. Not going to really worry about bending the tines. But what'll happen is that's really going to ream that hole open. I don't want that. So I'm going to take my finger, put it right next to the leather and the chisel, and I'm simply going to walk it out. Easy enough. Look how clean and straight that is. That already looks good. All right. Second, I'm going to take the first tine and I'm going to put it in the last hole. I can feel my chisel sink down in the groove line. There we go. And again, I have tines across. But look how clean and straight that is. That's because we're keeping this tool as straight up and down as we can. All right, we're going to go into a corner now. We're going to back down to a 4 tine. I'm going to get close to that corner. First tine, last hole. Let's pull that out. All right, let's jump down to a 2 tine. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the first tine in my last hole, and I'm simply going to mark that. I'm going to do the same as I move around my corner. Now this corner is open enough to where I could put 2 holes in, but let's use this as an example. Then we're going to come out of our turn right there. Okay, let's take our single tine, because now as I drive this through, each hole is a consistent distance. That's going to make our stitch line look very clean and tight. So I'm going to work my way around our corner. There we go. All right, 1 more. Now I've got 2 more there, but let's go 1 more. Because now I've got my mark, I'm in a straightaway, I can jump back over to my 6 tine. There we go, looking good. And 1 more. Now, at this point, we're coming into a corner. We can start on a corner, or in this situation, we can start in our corner and work out. The problem is I don't want to get to my corner and I have that much space to put 1 tine in or that much space. If that tine's too close to that edge, it's not going to leave enough leather there to remain solid. So as I get close to this corner, what I want to do is eyeball my stitch line. Right there, good, look at that. All right, it's a little bit short. So what I can do is spread just a little bit. So let's make a mark, light mark. I can see where those tines are. I'm going to move my chisel out just a little bit. Now, over the course of 3 or 4 good hits, look at that. That brings it right to my corner. Very cool, and I got plenty of leather there. All right, so easy enough on the round corner. Let's jump over to our square corner. All right, there's our groove. We're gonna butt this right up. That looks good, clean edge. All right, so let's take one piece. I'm going to work from my corner. We have to practice the same thing as we come into a square corner if we can't start there. But what I really don't like is to have one tine either left or right, incoming or outgoing from that corner. So what I'm going to do is take a one-tine chisel, and I'm going to drop it right in that corner. And I'm going to back that right up to my groove lines. Okay, from there, let's take our two-tine. Now what I'm going to do here is just like this tine was straight, I'm going to put the inside of the edge on the outside of that tine, just like how we're punching it. Let's just mark very lightly, all right? Let's do the same thing on the other side. There we go. Now, coming out of that corner, we're consistent. So I can take my 6, drop that right where I know it needs to be. There we go. We've got a consistent distance going around our corner. First tine, last hole. And again, coming into our corner, I'm just going to leave it right there, but we do have room for one more tine. Same thing on this side. I'm going to work my way out from that corner. There we go. All right, first tine, last hole. Now I'm going to do the same thing over here. Punch it exactly the same, but when I punch this, I'm just going to lay this piece close so that I can make sure my holes are consistent. They're not going to get off. First tine, last hole is going to help. But sometimes over a long distance, we can get a little variation. But again, we've got almost 1/8 of an inch hole there. So if my holes aren't perfectly centered, we're still okay. And one more 6, let's drop that in. There we go. Now I told you to do this and I didn't do this, but let's look at that anyway. Look at those holes. Because I used first tine, last hole, those are spot on. So when we marry these together, sewing is going to be a breeze. Now, 2 more quick points. On our corner, that to me gives us a good square corner. We can always use a round hole. The problem is when we do that, look how big that hole is compared to one of our chisel holes. It's going to stand out like a sore thumb. We can use an awl right down in that corner, but to me, angling that one tine just makes the whole thing look very clean, very finished. All right, our chisel holes are in. Let's jump over, do some hand sewing. Now, a couple of tools to talk about before we sew. This is a sewing pony, and this is an immense help, as opposed to a sewing horse. We actually sit on that, form and function, piece of equipment, and an amazingly beautiful piece of furniture, well made. For us crafters, a little bit easier. Now, I've got this clamp to my table. The point right here is that we sit on this, so therefore that clamp right in front of us, very stable. But for me, the great part about this is I can clamp this in all manner of configuration on my table. I can even clamp it sideways. Perfect example. Your favorite chair, your most comfortable chair is low to the ground. So I can take this, clamp this to my table sideways, puts that clamp right in front of me. The point there is we don't want to fatigue our arms. We want our arms to have ample room and to be in more of a natural position. All right, makes sense. Now with that, I tend to put some leather right here on the clamps so that that doesn't ding or mar my project. All right, clamp, easy enough, opens and closes, okay? Next step, Ritza Tiger Thread. And I love this thread. Now you're going to get 3 basic colors in the kit, but we also have a beautiful brown, red, and blue. Would those not make a gorgeous detail on a project, okay? Braided thread, one of my favorites, very strong. Lastly, sewing needles. These are the John James, and I absolutely love these. Extremely strong. Large eye, so we can get that big wax thread through there, but no sharp point. It's not needed. We're pre-punching our holes, and that will actually work against us. All right, so needles, thread, pony, let's do some sewing. Let's start right here. Easy enough. We're going to work with our round corner, so I'm going to clamp this down in my pony, and this too, we can push this out for a wider project. All right, with our thread, we're going to start sewing here very shortly, and then we're going to talk about some tricks. But with our thread, I'm going to cut 4 times my length. Now with me, I go a lot more. What I don't want to do is get all the way down to my end and have 2 little nubs here that I'm going to try to tie a knot with. Thread is relatively inexpensive. It's a couple of pennies per 3 yards, I think, and I don't know if I've ever finished a spool, all right? And we're gonna use some white thread. Now, it's not gonna really stand out as our stitch line, but it's gonna be a lot easier to see. All right, so we're gonna choke up on our thread because this is a little tough to explain, but what I wanna do, with this, no problem. I'm gonna pull my thread out this far each time. The problem is, say we're sewing a pair of chaps and I've got 40 inches of length there, that's gonna be 12 feet of thread. So what I can do is simply choke up on my thread and then as I go, pay that out. Makes it much easier. I'm simply doing this between each hole, okay? Let's get started, then we'll do some tricks and tips. Now, first off, saddler stitch. This is just a back and forth stitch. Super easy. Easy to remember how to get started because I'm gonna take one needle and push it through the first hole. Now, you'll notice I've got this to my left side. This is the face or the side that we punched from. Now, I'm right-handed. I would typically put this on my right. But my point there is that my holes on this side, they're actually funnel shaped. The hole on this side is actually puckered. That was the bottom piece. So if I lead from my left or my prominent hand, that needle's gonna fall right in that hole, all right? So let's pull that through and equalize that length out. Easy enough. Now our second hole, watch that. Cool, needle falls right in. So what I'll do is I'll start from there. Now I'm gonna take my other needle, there we go, get that in there. I can open up the hole with this needle. That second needle's gonna fall into it. So let's get about halfway through. I'm gonna pull down on the eye. Notice how that makes an X, okay? I'm gonna take my fingers and go from the eye to the tip and pull that through. There we go, okay? Looks good. Now, with tension, I'm gonna pull that tight. Not super tight, not as tight as I can get, but I can feel that seat down in there, all right? Let's do a second hole. First needle in, open that up. There we go. Hard to find that back side. There we are. Okay, I've got 2 stitches. Very cool. How easy could that be? And it looks great, very strong. But let's talk about this. Now, I don't want to sew down and back, say one needle all the way down and back. The biggest problem there is that I run the risk of splitting a thread every hole all the way back. Second problem, I'm going to do this all the way around. Then I'm going to come back doing it opposite. Therefore, my tension is not going to be clean and easy and consistent like it is now. Notice we're pulling both sides. Looks good, okay? So let's do this. We're just going to sew all the way around to this corner. Then we're going to hide a knot down in there. That to me is my favorite closure, but we're also going to do another closure or two. All right, so there we go. Now, one more thing. In fact, let's loosen that. There we go. If you don't have a lot of strength in your hands, it's not going to be an issue because what I can do is I can always go with one needle, pull that through. Now I'm going to pull that back towards me. Therefore, that opens that hole right up. I don't worry about splitting a stitch. And one more thing. You'll notice as I sew, I'm going to use my pinky to tighten my thread. The problem here is that over a distance, I'm going to burnish little lines in my hands. That's not great. So what I can do is I can tighten with my pinky here, tighten maybe the next hole with my thumb, the next one with my first finger, so therefore I'm not wearing out any finger. The thing is, we might have some distance to sew here, so therefore I don't want to tire out my arms or my hands or my fingers. Okay, so we're moving right along. I am simply going to sew right down to this corner. All right, coming down to our end. Now with this, I'm just going to pop my glue right there. Easy enough. The glue is just there long enough to hold us to get our chisel and our thread line in. So with this, I'm going to tie a square knot. So on our last hole, I'm just going to come through my front ply, pull that through, and same on the back. Pull that through. There we go. All right, let's tighten that down. Now with a square knot, let's move this. There we go. With a square knot, all I'm going to do is take my right, go over my left, circle around, and draw that down in good and tight. All right, left over right, circle around, draw that down in good and tight. There we go. Very cool. Now we've got a little bit of a bump there. That's going to be no issue because we're going to hammer our stitch line down. That's going to make that look very clean and consistent, but also that's going to knock that knot down. All right, let's take our knife. Now with this, I never use this part of my blade. So therefore I'm going to drop this in. Now I'm not going to cut through the thread. I'm going to pull the thread across my blade. There we go. Nice and easy. Flush. All right. Well, you know what? Let's see. That took maybe about 4 minutes to sew 8 inches. That's not bad. Okay. Let's set that aside. We're going to jump over to our 2 separate pieces. Now, what I don't want to do is clamp that down in my pony, because now my pony is going to tell me where my edges meet and not my thread. So let's do this. Let's butt that together. Let's take a clip. There we go. And maybe just one more to get that good and even. Once we get a couple of stitches in here, it's not going to be an issue. Then the thread tells us where our edges meet. So let's drop that in. Now with this, a little bit different, because we've got a chisel coming in from both sides. So we're going to have 2 puckers on the inside, but that's not really an issue. So let's start with one side or the other and come through. 1 needle, first hole, easy enough. And let's equalize that out. All right, there we go. Now from this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in from both sides, kind of open that hole up. There we go, make our X. And we've got a good stitch. Draw that down. Same thing from here on out. We're going to get all the way down to our end, just like we did with our round corner. All right, coming down to our last hole. Now we're going to back stitch. This is exactly what a sewing machine will do, but it's a little bit tougher when we're hand sewing, because we're going to have to squeeze through 2 pieces of thread in every hole. This is okay. Actually, it's a great closure, but I say it's okay because to me, I love that consistent stitch line look. Then when we get down here and we actually do a back stitch, now we've got two threads in each hole. So it kind of blows that consistency, but nonetheless, it still is going to be a good closure. But again, a little bit tough to get those needles through there because that hole's already got a lot of thread in it. So let's see, get that one in there. There we go. All right, push that through. Now we can back sew 3 or 4 stitches, but you can see it's kind of tough to do, isn't it? We can back sew 3 or 4 stitches. I'm going to leave it right there. So with my knife, let me grab my knife. I left it on my other table. With my knife, I'm going to take this, and again, I'm going to use this part of my blade, pull my thread back across that. There we go. That looks pretty good. All right, so the hand sewing portion, easily done and looks very good. In fact, look at our meat on that. How clean is that edge? All right, we're going to jump over, hammer down our stitch line. But before we do that, there's 2 cool tricks that are going to help us out. Now, because sewing a long strap, say a belt, or in this case, a briefcase strap, in fact, this is the shorter of the 2, this can be a real problem. Because what I'm going to have to do is put it in my pony or my horse, and I'm going to have to sew a little bit, scoot it, sew, scoot it. This is going to be bending around, flapping around. It's going to be in my way. It's kind of frustrating. So what I can do is I've simply got a piece of suede strapped to a rafter with a clip on it. Now I can put that clip on the end of my strap, and that's going to keep that right in front of me. So therefore, I can sew with my hands in a very comfortable position. But as I move along, since this is suede and exactly what saddle seats are made of, it's going to grip. So therefore I can raise that as I go and move my belt or my strap up so it's always right in front of me. Makes it very easy on your hands. And again, we can sew a long distance because we're not tiring out our arms. Now, one more trick. Last one, I promise. Then we're going to hammer down our stitch line. With the needles, you'll notice as you use them, you'll start to get wax building up in the eye, and it can be hard to get that thread through. So all I have to do is take my 2 needles and a lighter, just run a little heat over those, rub that off with a cloth, brand new, ready to go. Wax thread's going to slip right through it. All right, let's step over to our quartz, hammer down our stitch line. Now when we hammer down our stitch line, it's going to do 2 things right off the bat. First off, it's going to close down our holes so we see thread and not hole. But secondly, it's going to sink that thread line below the top grain because we've got a groove in there. Now, we used a white thread, simply easier to see when we're learning to hand sew. But I've got a sample here with our brown thread so we can see it a little bit better. But right off the bat, notice, I went straight into my corner and straight out. Look at that. That makes a terrible jump as opposed to ours. Looks very clean and square. Okay, so good point there. But with this, I can certainly use a mallet. I just don't want my mallet at such an angle that it's going to leave hammer marks inside on my leather. So all I'm going to do with a tack hammer, hammer that line down. All right, now I'm hoping the camera can pick this up, but notice a difference between our stitch that's hammered down and the stitch that is not. Looks so much cleaner, so much more consistent. And again, when I run my hand across that, I cannot even feel the thread. All right, so I'm going to hammer down both pieces. We're done. And there we go. Both pieces look fantastic. Now, we just did 2 corners. Kept it simple, pick up the stitch. But the big point here, no longer out of our reach. Now, you may not start with a briefcase. You absolutely can. But there are all manner of projects out there. And in fact, the majority of leather projects now, not out of our reach. And that's the point. I hope every stitch you put in is spot on perfect. Good luck with your projects.